be a sobering time as well. But Yahweh's going to watch over us and bless us. At this time, turn it over to great Kahan Benjamin Krausshoff.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Yahweh's peace be with everyone. Please be seated. And let's go ahead and put up that title slide. I got a skedaddle-roo here. The End of Damascus. This is part 14 of the original Sons of Yahweh. And I really need you to pay very close attention. You don't need to write every number down. Just watch the slides, okay? Please. Okay, so let's put up the first slide. This is where I left off last week. Told you to get here, and we just heard it again. In the third book of Israel, chapter 3, verse 28, Pastor says, you have to know Yahweh has a plan that he's fulfilling here and bringing you through. You are the remnant who's going to be teaching 2 billion people. You're not just being called here for any reason. We're going to bring people here from all over the world. Many, many nations are going to flow to the house of Yahweh. You put that in Yahmatria, you see the word yada. 3057 in the Greek is spear. 1834 in Hebrew is Damascus. 2166 is the third number, and it means time in Euphrates River. Okay? Now keep those in your mind as we go through here. Let's go to the next slide. The 18th book of Israel, chapter 24, verse 33, titled Damascus, the prophecies rest on the prophecy of Damascus, from 8:11:18, a palindrome. Pastor said, the prophecies all rest with the destruction that takes place with Damascus. The first number you get is 758, and it means Aram, which is Syria. 758 in Greek means chief ruler of first in rank or power from the beginning. Remember, Damascus is the oldest inhabited city on the face of the earth. The second number, 4550, means a pulling up, plucked up, uprooted, and removed. And 4550 in the Greek means rotten, morally worthless, corrupt, and depraved. When you add those numbers, you get 5308, which means to fall. From 5307, attacked, bring down, fall, cease. Remember Isaiah 17, it will cease from being a city, Damascus. Throw down, be judged, and deserted. And then 5308 in Greek means high, lofty, exalted. From 5311, height, elevation, which, by the way, is what the word Aram means in Assyrian language. And then from 5228, meaning beyond. Keep that word in your mind, beyond and uprooted. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now, we all need to know the only way to understand the Damascus prophecies is from the most holy place, the Holy of Holies, right here. Okay, from between the two cherubim, the two witnesses. This is where we get these oracles that are taught to us about this Damascus, this land of Hadrach. And pastor says in the 18th book, chapter 24:33, in the most holy place, he made 2 cherubim or 2 witnesses. Get that word witnesses in your mind as this was brought out this morning in the Gematria and actually tagged to our number 1074. The 2 witnesses are tagged to it. In fact, all the works that began at creation are actually tagged to this ending number of ours. Yahweh did that for you to show you so there wouldn't be any doubts where his house is. Put that in Gematria, you get 24:25, and it's for Luke 24:25, which means, O fools, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. In verse 20 there in that sermon, pastor said, you're a fool if you don't believe. You're a fool if you don't believe. 3:22. That's pastor's tag. Now look at the 2 cherubim called the cherubim of gold in Exodus. You get 8:28. Cherubim of gold at Abel, 1074. Cherubim on ark at Abel, 1074. Cherub Malach of the ark, 1074. And then when you put in all the works, the 7 works, Abel, Melchizedek, Abraham, Moshe, Yahshua Messiah, Yahakob Hawkins, and Yisrayl Abel Hawkins, the golden 7-lamp lampstand, you get 1074. Now you're a fool if you don't believe that. Yahweh's showing you that this work is the only work that can explain the Damascus prophecy. Let's go to the next slide. The 18th book of Israel, chapter 14, verse 5, pastor says, the ruinous heap comes to pass in the days of the 7th messenger of Yahweh. The 7th messenger of Yahweh, 3:22. Damascus prophet, 1074. The 18th book, chapter 24, verse 67. Pastor says, Damascus is a very old city. The prophecy concerning Damascus in Isaiah 17 says you're going to become a ruinous heap. The prophecy concerning Damascus, 3:22. Again, showing you who can explain it. Then I put in the whole verse where he says, the ruinous heap comes to pass in the days of the seventh messenger of Yahweh. It comes to pass in that time period, no other time period. The Yahmatria on that phrase, a ruinous heap in the Hebrew, if I don't get mixed up here, is 743. Word 743 means a chief messenger, which he went on to explain means a flying messenger. A chief messenger is one who can fly. Notice, put that phrase in, you get 1442, seventh, which is used in Revelation 10:7 about the seventh messenger. And remember, he flew all over the earth in the Middle East, showing these leaders the peaceful solution to stop these wars. Okay? See that American Eagle jet? You can probably see Pastor in the window if you look close. Let's go to the next slide. So from chapter 24, Damascus, the prophecies rest on the prophecy of Damascus. Pastor said in verse 21, here in Zechariah 9:1, the interlinear that gives you the Hebrew for this verse says the oracle, word of Yahweh. That's what the prophecies are. They're the works or words of Yahweh written by his prophets under inspiration to be brought down to you in these last days. They were given to them, but they couldn't understand them. Daniel even told you he couldn't understand them. Daniel actually asked me in visions to explain it to him. Does that make it clear to you? You need help. Praise Yahweh, right? That's what we came for. So, oracles of the land of Hadrach and Damascus, 3:22. And 11:08, which means ruin. To keep that in mind, in Revelation or Isaiah 17:1, it's going to become a ruinous heap. 11:08 in Greek means knowledge, doctrine, wisdom, knowing, understand, and comprehend. Yes, he does understand these prophecies, and he's trying to help us do the same. Add those two numbers, you get 1430, which means a heap. So now you see ruin and heap, right? And 1430 in Greek is the word Duma. Duma, where did we see that? Let's go to the next slide. On 4/7/2018, the Duma chemical attack in Syria. And if you Duma is only about 9 miles. It's actually a suburb of Damascus. And you remember it was a fake chemical attack that they tried to blame on Assad, okay? It's actually proven to be a fake. And I put in President Trump's, President Trump actually struck Syria for this alleged chemical attack on 4/13. Remember that number? 4/13/2018. And I put in his full speech right here, and you get the number 4818, and it means a chariot or chariots. And if you recall, Pastor explained what a chariot, the word for chariot in the Hebrew, he was a little bit off on the spelling. He even said, I hope I get this right. It's actually the word Merkaba up there in 4818. But when you put in Pastor's quote, notice he didn't make any mistakes. Because he spelled it wrong, it turned out right. And it means a missile. You see that? A missile, chariot. Remember, there's chariots of fire in the sky, and there's chariots on the ground called tanks. And notice, in video released Saturday morning, the USS Monterey, a guided missile cruiser deployed to Fifth Fleet, launches Tomahawk missiles at Syria as part of an Allied strike on April 13, 2018. So there you see that 4/13 comes into play again. Let's go to the next slide. So from the 14th, 4/14/18, the 18th book part, or there's only one book. Let's see. Pastor says, this is the title. I actually put in the title. It says, Chapter 14, Yahweh 27, 2018, the uprising in Syria and the attacks are shown in Revelation 6 as the quartet prophecy. You put that in Yahmatria, you get 1526, which means go into captivity, which is used in Moshe 5:27. You see that when he says he's going to take them beyond Damascus? You see that? And then the second number is 1153, which means Damascus. Okay, now notice it's used right here. I took the one out of Acts where Shaul was on the road to Damascus to arrest some believers. You remember that? And he saw the flash of light. And we'll talk about that in a minute. When you put in the land of Hadrach, Damascus, you get 758, which again means Aram in Syria. And chief, 758 in Greek means chief, ruler, a first, beginning. Remember, they're from the beginning. Let's go to the next slide. From the 18th book of Israel, chapter 14, verse 61, it says, President Donald Trump weighs a military response to the suspected chemical weapon attack in Duma, a town on the outskirts of Damascus. Put that in, you get 8208. That's Pastor's sermon from 8208. Pastor's going to give us a clue about who Damascus is, okay? Now, the second number, 8073, means from 5566, an image, statue, figure, a likeness, an idol. You remember the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. That's the title of the sermon from 8208, the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, showing our work in this time period. So you see Daniel, that's not really Daniel, that's a depiction, but he's showing Nebuchadnezzar what his dream meant. Remember the golden head and the statue? You remember that, right? Let's go to the next slide. So let's find the clue that Yahweh was pointing at from the sermon on 8208, verse 104. He says, he's quoting from a book. It says, begun thy Nimrod, and ending with the death of Belshazzar. Remember when Daniel's time period was? About 607 to 534, in that time area right there. And this time period right here ended at that very time in 538 BC. That would be about 4 years before Daniel, the last bit of Daniel, the history of any of Daniel left, after having lasted nearly 1,700 years. He's talking about the Babylonian Empire, okay? In the time of Nebuchadnezzar, it extended over Chaldea, Assyria, Arabia, Syria, Palestine. Nebuchadnezzar in history. Now, if you know the rest of this, you'll know also he was the head of gold that he showed, because his dream was about this great image of a mighty man with a head of gold and whose body was different parts of metal. They would really make a big show of this, you know, if they could in Hollywood today. You know, they'd probably really go all over with that. But you put that quote in, and it's 5175, and it means a serpent. From 5172 to practice divination. And you remember, Vatican means divining serpent. So it's talking about the Vatican, okay? This image. Notice, it extended over Chaldea, Assyria, Arabia, Syria, Palestine. 3006, the tag of the original sons who are also inspiring this. And notice, if you look at the map there in front of you of the Babylonian Empire in the time of Nebuchadnezzar, the head of gold, the arrow's pointing right there at Damascus. You see that? In the land of Aram, or Syria, they call it today. Let's go to the next slide. So put in Damascus, Syria, head of gold, 1380, which means territory, district, and quarter. I'll get into that in another sermon. But it's a whole territory of cities, the land of Hadrach. Okay, and 1154 again means Damascus. You see that? Okay, head of fine gold, 666. It's called head of gold and head of fine gold in Daniel 2. When you put in Moshe 527, where he said beyond Damascus, and Acts 743, where he said Babylon, you get 1776, which is the number at the base of that pyramid, okay? And then you put in Babylon, Damascus, the head of fine gold, 1776 again, showing it's part of this new world order from the beginning. Let's go to the next slide. Now, Pastor showed us what ruinous heap meant in the Yahmatria, 743, a chief messenger, to bring tidings, pastor, to lead, to induce, which means to persuade or convince and inspire and move. Now notice, Acts 743, same number, where he shows that I'm going to carry you away beyond Babylon. Beyond Babylon, okay? Shinar and Babylon, 743. Okay, remember in Genesis 10:10, it says, Nimrod's kingdom or Cush's kingdom, Babel, Erech, Akkad, and all of them in the land of Shinar. Put that in, you get 2166 Euphrates River, showing you the very area that it's talking about. Let's go to the next slide. This is from the 18th book, chapter 14, verse 9. Pastor says, I'll tell you one thing to look for and remember. Syria was part of the great Roman Empire. Put that in, you get 862, which means to pull out, root out, pluck away. Remember, I'm going to move you beyond Babylon, uproot you. 5172 means to practice divination, okay? And remember, I'll put in the full the full quote there, it says, Syria, I'll tell you one thing to look for and remember. Syria was part of the great Roman Empire. In fact, it was a big part of the great Roman Empire, but it changed. It changed big time and was taken over by some religions that were listening to a woman called Nora, who started a great movement and also took away some of the falsehoods. Put that statement in, it's 1834 Damascus, used in Moshe 5:26 and 27, where he says, therefore, I will send you into captivity beyond Damascus. Let's go to the next slide. Now remember the stone that hit the image? From the sermon from 8208 about the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, verse 118, pastor says, you watched while a stone, which was cut out without hands, struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them into pieces. It's being struck today. How? By the teaching, right? Of the House of Yahweh? So put in the first number, 1495, and it means Passover, cut off. The second number, 897, means Babylon. And the third number, 1074, is pastor's tag. And notice you put in the stone that struck the image became a great mountain. Isaiah 2:2, you get 2474 Yisrayl. That's this mountain that you're on now, the great city of Israel. Let's go to the next slide. From the 18th book, chapter 24, verse 71, pastor said, that's including Damascus. Now he was quoting from Jeremiah 5, where he said I'm going to gather all my people, okay, and bring them into the fold, into the flock. I'm going to gather all my flock. He said, that's including Damascus. The people there are suffering. They have ever since the days of Abraham, but the big prophecy is now. They have survived and grown, and Damascus has become a super city, but it's going to be a heap of ruins, a ruinous heap. Out of all countries where I have driven them and bring them back to their folds, that's you at the house of Yahweh. Notice, put that in, you get 20616. That's the sermon from 20616. You see that? Yahweh's given us another clue about Damascus. The other number, 2347, means to have pity on, to be concerned, to show pity and spare. Yes, Yahweh's going to spare these people. Yahweh has people there. And that's why we're supposed to come here to be training in this last 3.5 years to help these people. 2347 means in Greek tribulation, persecution, affliction, trouble, anguish, burden, pressure, to press, afflict, suffer tribulation and distress. Go to the next slide, please. From the 16th book of Israel, chapter 14, verse 9, pastor says, this is from the 2616 sermon. He says, but right now he shows they're on the 7 hills of Rome beyond Babylon, beyond Damascus, as Yahweh's prophet said. Then Stephen in Acts 7, remember, he called it Babylon. Stephen knew what he was talking about there, and he used those words deliberately, inspiringly. He was inspired to use the word Babylon. We just saw it, right? It's the head of gold, right? But beyond Damascus, you can see what's occurring to Damascus right now in the news. Don't think that any of this is being done by accident. Put that in, that quote in, you get 860. They're on the 7 hills of Rome, beyond Babylon, beyond Damascus, as Yahweh's prophet said. You get 862, which means to pull out, root out, to pluck away. Again, remember? They're being uprooted and carried beyond Damascus, to beyond Babylon, to where? Rome, right? 5172 means to practice divination. And if you put in Acts 7:43, and I will carry you away beyond Babylon. Sorry, I'm babbling. I get that way when I use that word Babylon. I'm babbling on, I guess. I will carry you away beyond Babylon, 45:35, which means uprooted, to pluck and remove. Now I'm on my last couple slides here. The 10th book of Israel, part 2, chapter 14, verse 89. It's proving here who got plucked up. But you can actually see this in the scripture that all of this was prophesied, that these religions, these 4 religions, were actually uprooted and moved to Rome, where they were transplanted. Actually transplanted, as one of the priestly farmers showed me. And they were actually transplanted, rooted up, taken to Rome, transplanted, along with all the artifacts of the temple, and Titus is the one that did it. Notice you get 24:20, which is the word in Daniel 8:23. Remember, the king of fierce expression, understanding dark sentences. I went over that before. And then it means Masons and Jesuits, etc. Let's go to the next slide. I got to get this in. The 18th book of Israel, chapter 14, verse 8. Word number 743, Pastor says, it also comes from 71, which means to lead, to bring to pass, to induce, meaning to get people to believe. That's a hard thing to do, to get people to believe. Notice that word induce, the second meaning means bring on the birth of a baby. Put in bring on the birth of a baby, you get 221, fiery flame, 1326, destruction, to break to pieces, to desolate. And third number, 1002, means a missile. When you go from when they did the Duma attack on April 13, 2018 to April 13, 2021, you get 1096, which means am born, arrived, came into being, came to pass, proved and turned. You remember last week, Pastor said, Damascus is going to be a turning point. Damascus will be a turning point. 322, Pastor's tag. And my final slide, now get this. The refugees from Damascus, 1512, which means to burst forth, give birth, draw up, and take out. The second number, 1096, we just saw that about being born, coming to pass, and proved and turned. Add that up, you get 2608, which is the word Chenanya. When you put in remnant from Aram, Syria, you get 1452, which means to fence up, to hedge, to enclose, to wall in around and protect. He's going to protect them. And notice the second number, 1154, is Damascus. When you add those up, you get 2606, which is Chananel, which is the same word as Chenanya with the EL put on at the end of it. Well, who's Chenanya? Look at the bottom, Acts 9:10. You remember when Shaul went to Damascus? And he was baptized by Chenanya in Damascus. We'll carry on with that, but remember, he had a vision. Chenanya in Damascus, 1074. Disciple at Damascus, 1074. Vision of Yahweh. Well, I wonder who he was talking to in that vision, right? 1074. That's all my time. If you'd all please stand. It's been a great pleasure and opportunity, and at this time, I'd like to turn it over